Well, hello. Hey folks, welcome to episode 13. Thank you once again, as always, for joining me. It's a privilege and a pleasure to have you here, so welcome. Now, I want to do today's video as a little bit of a carry-on from the last episode, which actually proved to be a lot more interesting than I originally thought out. Last week's video was all about Strat style guitars and why I personally felt that I'd never quite 100% got on with them as my primary electric guitar of choice. And the comments section was really, thankfully, quite civilized and polite. Everyone had an opinion and everyone expressed it very articulately, and I really appreciated that. You know, there were some guys that were predominantly Strat players, and the point I made in last week's video was, if you are a Strat player, what guitar kind of has that effect on you? You know, which is the guitar that you find a little bit difficult to navigate and doesn't necessarily feel like the most natural thing in the world to play? And a lot of people were flip side of that as well. A lot of people kind of saw it from my point of view and were Telly players and Les Paul players predominantly and felt the same way about Strats. Nonetheless, it was very interesting, and it kind of made me think about carrying this idea forwards, but I want to avoid any kind of contentious points. I don't want to ruffle any feathers because I love the Strat, as I kind of think I've proved in the last video, but today I want to carry it on and prove that point even further. Now, what was very interesting that happened the evening that my video came out, I happened to be on YouTube once again, and I was watching some videos, and I came across Rhett Scholl's channel, and he's a great guitar player, great YouTuber. I've not actually seen any of his content before, and the first video of his that I watched was about Strats, and it was titled something like, "Why do Strats sound better tuned to E flat?" Quite a contentious question, potentially, but I was intrigued, so I clicked on the video, watched the whole thing, and in that video, I'm sure some of you may have seen it, he very, very intelligently laid out some rather scientific ways of looking at the Strat design and why he felt that perhaps tuning the guitar down half a step meant it kind of unlocked its true potential. And I think Rhett came from a similar viewpoint as I had, which is that it was never his primary guitar. He was more of a Les Paul and Telly kind of player. And the E flat thing just kind of really made a lot of sense. And to me, it made a lot of sense. So when I finished watching that video, I thought, I'm going to try that. Came and got this guitar, tuned it to E flat, and it's still in E flat to this day. And I think this guitar is going to remain this way for a long time. Now, I have a couple of issues with what Rhett said in his video, which I'll come on to later on, just about kind of E flat tuning in general. But just to wrap up my thoughts on the Strat, you know, I do actually think this E flat thing makes a lot of sense. It transforms the feel of the guitar, it makes it a little bit more elastic, not quite so kind of tough to play into, which is one of the advantages I laid out last time talking about Tellys and Les Pauls, that I felt they're just a little bit easier when you play an A chord. They give in a little bit, they cave a little bit, and Strats don't tend to do that in standard tuning. But in E flat, I think they actually do a little bit. The other thing, of course, is that just having that deeper, lower frequency when you're playing open strings helps to bring out some more of that lower mid and low end content that Strats sometimes lack, at least in comparison to other guitars that I've mentioned. So a couple of pointers there, and I don't want to dismiss or fully endorse any of the science that was talked about in those videos, because it is just a bit of fun, really. It's not, this stuff doesn't matter that much. It's not life and death science, but it's interesting, and I'm sure that there are reasons for these perceptions, but whatever those reasons might be, I feel E flat works for me. On this guitar, it transformed this guitar actually, and I really loved this guitar anyway, but I love it even more now. And as I say, I'm going to talk a little bit later more about E flat tuning, but let me give you an example of why I think it works on this guitar. It also kind of, following on from that video, it made me think, well, what could I do with a Strat to make it my primary guitar if I felt so inclined, and what is it that maybe people feel they need to do to a Strat to make it their primary guitar? And I've kind of boiled it down to three things, at least in my case. So the tuning, I think, is quite a big thing, the E flat tuning. Boosting the Strat as well. Now, a lot of our favourite Strat players, I think they use a Strat because they're using it in conjunction with some other gears. So famously, Stevie Ray boosted his amps with tube screamers. That wasn't the core of his sound, but it helped. Richie Blackmore boosted his Strats with his old reel-to-reel tape recorder into his Marshalls. It wasn't the core of his sound, but it helped. Robin Trower boosted his Strats. Hendrix boosted his Strats with his fuzz pedals. So there is kind of a theme here, and to me anyway, I think just having a nice little boost, it doesn't have to do a lot, but I'm using the string singer side of the Kingtone Duelist today, basically a tube screamer type thing. It's not the core of the sound, but it really helps. And the last thing is volume. To me, every electric guitar, every instrument in fact, sounds better the louder it is. Strats in particular, I think, really benefit from having some volume behind them. So, in the spirit of that, I've cranked up 2 amps today. I've got the Dr. Z Dr. Z Route 66 up there, and I've got the Mesa Boogie Fillmore. Great combination of amps with that Kingtone Duelist, and the other secret to Strat players is fuzz. So I've got the Kingtone Silicon Mini Fuzz on the board, and I had it on the whole time in that introduction. You didn't hear it off at all. Loads of gain available, but because of the nature of the Strat pickup and just using the volume control, it's super dynamic. So let me show you exactly what I'm talking about and how you can really get light and shade out of this guitar. And I just think that all these things added up, at least for me, make the Strat a much more viable option as a primary guitar. So let me just play a little bit more and you'll hear what I'm talking about. I'm going to turn the fuzz back on. Makes a little bit of noise, as you can tell, but then some of the best tones do. Right, here we go. Turn the fuzz back off there. So hopefully what you'll be able to get from that is that compared to the last video I did, I feel a lot happier playing this guitar. And you know, as I said last time, I do think Strats are brilliant utility guitars, whether it's for clean funky stuff or more of a spanky kind of bridge or bridge and middle country thing as well. They do that very well. But I think for me anyway, this is the calling of a Strat, is to just have it loud, a little bit more raucous, and it kind of pushes it in line a little bit more with the instruments that I am more comfortable with. So I think maybe that's a little bit of an interesting point to make to some of the people who commented in the last video that you kind of agreed and Strats weren't your thing. Maybe these are some of the little tools and tricks that you could use to utilise a Strat better for yourself. So, no more kind of negativity towards Strats. I love all guitars. I just wanted to get that out there and clear up some of the potential conjecture from the last video. So, second thing I want to talk about today, as I said, is E-flat tuning in general. And Rhett's video was very interesting. I did disagree with a couple of things, most notably the fact that he said whenever he's played a Gibson guitar in E-flat tuning, it just doesn't work for him. It's muddy, a bit of a, I can't remember exactly what he said, but a bit messy kind of thing. I can see why that would be the case, but some of the best guitar tones I've ever heard were in E-flat tuning on Gibson guitars. A lot of my favourite bands from the 70s and the 80s, you know, most notably bands like Kiss, early Aerosmith, Guns N' Roses, Extreme, Nuno Bettencourt and Extreme, Van Halen, all those kind of bands, they all tune to E-flat. Not all the time, but most often they tune to E-flat, and it brought something out of the guitar. I just think when you play an open chord in those tunings, it's such a subtle shift, you would think, but it makes such a big difference. I mean, I can kind of exemplify it here with the Strat. I mean, I'm not playing a Gibson today, obviously, but let me play, you know, an F position chord, which would be an E. This is very unscientific, but just there's something about it having that low E flat. So let me show you what I mean. So, of course, you're probably just going to say, well, yeah, it's tuned lower, of course it's going to sound deeper. Yes, I take your point, but it transforms the instrument to me, and there's something about hearing riffs that are tuned down to my ear in a rock sensibility that just works better than standard tuning some of the time. Just works, and it works on Gibson guitars. You know, all of those bands that I've just mentioned predominantly use Gibson guitars, or at least humbucker loaded guitars. So I think it works. I think it works very well. Now, my takeaway from all this is actually, how can you use this? Because I think a lot of players are maybe a little bit averse to tuning down because everyone else plays in standard tuning. And that's always been my aversion to it. You know, I've very rarely had a guitar that's always been tuned to E flat because my thought is, well, when I'm going to play with other people or play songs or whatever, they're going to be in standard tuning, so what's the point in having that? And actually, what that's made me realise is that it's good to have an instrument in a different tuning because it challenges you. So having this Strat in E flat, and I think it's going to stay this way, what that means is that when I do play along with songs or play with other people, I have to think differently about the fingerboard. I have to transpose everything up a semitone, and that is not a bad thing because what it means is that you learn different positionings on the neck, different voicings on the neck, because you have to adapt. So for example, if I was going to play in the key of G, which I like to do a lot, suddenly it's A flat. Now you don't have those nice open G. You know, that open position that you would normally have in standard tuning. So you have to adapt. I think that that's only beneficial, that's only healthy for your fingerboard knowledge, your theory knowledge. It means that you just have to play in different positions, and then when you do go to those open positions, so say you're playing a song in F sharp, suddenly you've got all these... You know, whereas before you'd have had to be... You know, so hopefully you see what I mean there about the difference, but I think it's really interesting, and I'm always going to have a guitar in E flat. Don't know if I'd be quite brave enough to gig it just yet, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens. You know, when you go out and play a cover gig in the future, back you know, when gigs become a thing again, fingers crossed. I think it's going to be interesting to have a guitar in a different tuning. That could be, you know, open G or any open tuning, but that's a little bit more impractical. But having a guitar in E flat, not only does it change the whole sound of the instrument, not only does it offer you extended range, because you've got that extra low, you know, half step down sound, but also it challenges you to find different ways of expressing notes on the fingerboard, and I think that's only a good thing. You know, what's to lose? Just give it a try. So I think it's an interesting point. It rounds off the Strat issue quite nicely. And hopefully for anyone who felt in the last video that I was maybe just putting Strats down in contrast to Les Pauls and 335s, this is a universal rule that I'm applying to Strats. I think it works well for Strats, this lower tuning. I think it works great for any guitar, in fact. And you know, in future videos maybe I'll play a Les Paul or something in E flat tuning. So just give it a try for yourselves. I think it might work for a lot of people. It certainly works for me. I love the sound of this guitar now. So I think I'm going to wrap it up today. I've talked quite a lot, but hopefully, you know, that's just quite an interesting point. So thank you, Rhett, for making that video at just the right time, so that I could, or at least for me seeing it at just the right time, so I could do this part 2. Thank you all for joining me once again. I hope you've enjoyed this little part 2 of the Strat kind of comments. If you have, let me know in the comments. Let me know any further questions that you've got as well, because I'll address them in future episodes. And last of all, before I play you out, I just want to say that I've noticed that quite a lot of my viewers on this channel are not subscribed. So if you would be so kind and you enjoy what I'm doing here, it would really help me out if you not only like this video and comment, but also make sure you're subscribed to the channel. It really helps and it really means a lot. So, until next time guys, take good care of yourselves, rock out in E flat, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.